The Longest Night of the Year, a Mick and Mack mystery. Act 1, A Misplaced Hour. Toronto wore Christmas Eve the way it wore winter best, quietly, with endurance. Snow fell thick enough to dull the city's sharp edges, settling into doorways, streetcar tracks, and the shoulders of men who had nowhere particular to go. Church bells marked the hour with patient insistence. Shop windows glowed, footsteps crunched and vanished. For detectives Mick McCathie and Archie MacNeely, should have been an easy night. A routine detail, a sealed envelope, a short drive across town. The envelope had been prepared at police headquarters that afternoon, marked for a magistrate who preferred his paperwork delivered discreetly and before Christmas morning. No sirens, no urgency, just custody, care, and a signature at the other end. The kind of errand that let a man believe the city might behave itself for one night. They stopped briefly near St. Michael's Cathedral, long enough to confirm directions, long enough for Mac to complain about the cold, long enough for the bells to roll overhead like slow-moving thunder. When they returned to the car, the envelope was gone. There was no broken lock, no disturbed snow, no sign of a struggle or a hurried escape. Just an empty seat where a sealed package had been, and the sudden awareness that something small had gone very wrong. While the loss was still settling in, another call came through. An alley only a few blocks away. A body. The man was known, a petty thief, a familiar face in ledgers and lineups. Not dangerous, not important enough to die spectacularly. He lay half buried in drifted snow, eyes open, hands stiff with cold. There were no marks, no blood, no sign of violence. Only a pocket watch clutched tight in his frozen fingers. It stopped at exactly 11:17. Mac, always quicker with humor than reverence, remarked on Christmas miracles and the efficiency of winter. Mick said nothing. He crouched, studied the watch, and turned it carefully in his gloved hand. It was recently repaired. The casing showed fresh work. The movement inside was clean. Someone had taken time with it. Care. Precision. Whatever had ended the thief's night, it hadn't been neglect. Above them, the bells rang again. Steady, unhurried, indifferent to stolen envelopes and men who would not see morning. Snow continued to fall, erasing footprints, almost as soon as they were made. Somewhere between the missing hour and the stopwatch, Toronto had lost its rhythm, and Christmas Eve was only just beginning. Act 2, Things That Don't Tick Right. The watch took them east, away from the alley and into a part of Toronto that still believed in small shops and patient hands. Finch Watch Repair occupied a narrow slice of street between a tailor who looked perpetually offended and a tobacconist who had given up altogether. The sign above the door had once been blue. Now it was merely hopeful. Mac slowed as they reached it. "Well," he said, "if this fellow's still working, we'll be interrupting a miracle." Mick glanced at him. "You know him?" Mac shrugged. "I know everyone who ever fixed something I couldn't afford to replace." Inside, clocks ruled the room. Wall clocks, mantel clocks, carriage clocks. Some ticking, some silent, some stubbornly refusing to agree with one another. The air smelled of oil, brass, and old patience. Walter Finch looked up from his bench. "Archie MacNeely," he said mildly, "you still winding things too tight?" "Only when they matter," Mac replied. "Evening, Wally." Mick placed a pocket watch on the counter. "Found a man who won't be checking the time again." Wally picked it up gently, his expression changing. Not alarmed, just attentive. "Oh," he said, "that's Keen's." Mac blinked. "You know the dead man?" "He was in this morning," Wally said. "Cold, nervous, in a hurry. Wanted it running right." And Mick asked. "And it was," Wally said. "Still should be." He opened the case and studied the movement, frowning slightly. His watch didn't fail while he said it was interfered with. Mack leaned on the counter. Sounds deliberate? Usually is, Wally replied. I've had men asking lately. Not for repairs, but adjustments. Minutes shaved, minutes added. Small lives for important people. Alibis, Mick said. Schedules, Wally added. Witnesses who trust clocks more than memory. Mack shook his head. That's a terrible way to live. Yes, Wally said, and a profitable one. Outside, snow began to fall again, thicker now. They were still talking when Seamus O'Rourke arrived, trailing cold air and indignation. I told him not to touch him yet, Shay announced. A man deserves a moment, even if he's made a mess of his life. Mac smiled. Evening, Shay. Don't evening me, Shay said. Not tonight. Shay spoke of Keene with irritation edged by fondness. Thief, yes, but one who tried, clumsily and late, to do the right thing now and then. Someone who'd turn up at the church hungry, apologetic, and eager to leave quickly. He said he was in trouble, Shay said. Not the usual sort. Mick filed that away. At headquarters, the answer came back with the missing envelope. It wasn't cash, Mick said quietly. Mac sighed. Now that would have been too easy. It was names, Mick continued. Relief cases. Orphans, war widows, and one man listed as dead. Mac frowned. Dead men usually don't cause trouble. This one does, Mick said. Enough that someone wanted the list before morning. The bells from St. Michael's rang the quarter hour. Mick glanced at the watch in his hand. It still read 11:17. Not broken. Waiting. Keene didn't understand what he'd taken, Mick said. And someone else did, Mac replied. Snow filled the street, racing footprints almost as soon as they formed. Somewhere between a stopped watch and a missing name, a bad decision had already been made, and Christmas Eve was no longer pretending otherwise. Act 3. The Man in the Snow. They didn't start with a church. They started with what was left behind. The alley looked smaller in daylight, less dramatic. Snow filled in the corners where a man had tried to disappear, smoothing everything into something almost respectable. Mac stood where Keene had fallen, hands jammed into his coat pockets. Funny thing, he said. You always think a fellow like this is running from something. Turns out, sometimes he's running toward it. Mick crouched again, slower this time. He studied the wall, the drifted snow, the way footprints faded unevenly toward the street. He didn't collapse, Mick said. He hid. Make it better? Makes it human. They walked. Keene's name opened doors that his body never had. A bartender remembered him nursing one drink too long because he didn't like to spend money indoors. A shopkeeper who recalled Keene insisted on paying for a sandwich he'd already half eaten. A parish volunteer who said he always showed up late, breathless, apologetic. He stole, Shay said later matter-of-factly, but not from churches, and not from charity. Mick looked at him. You knew him. Everyone knows someone like Keene, Shay replied. Men who don't fit anywhere, but still try. Shay led them into the parish hall. The smell of tea and boiled cabbage lingered stubbornly. A few men sat at folding tables, hands wrapped around chipped mugs, pretending not to listen. Came to me earlier that night, Shay said. An hour before the bells. Mac glanced up. What did he want? To give something back. Shay reached into a drawer and produced a folded scrap of paper. Creased, damp, smudged. He said he'd taken the wrong thing, Shay continued. Said it wasn't money. Said it was names. Mick unfolded the paper carefully. They matter, he said. Names always do. Keene, it turned out, had taken the envelope, thinking to buy him a warm night. When he saw what was inside, he panicked. He tried to return it quietly, without questions. Someone followed him. Not close enough to be seen, just close enough to be felt. Came back here, she said, but the doors were locked for rehearsal. I told him to wait inside the hall. He said he'd circle the block. Mack exhaled slowly. He never made it back? No, she said, he didn't. He went from the parish hall to Finch watch repair. The shop was closed, the windows dark, but Wally let them in anyway. He listened without interrupting, holding Keene's watch like a fragile thing. It wasn't meant to stop, Wally said finally. It was meant to stall. Mick frowned to explain. Wally opened the casing, pointing gently. A delay mechanism, crude but effective. The watch slows, then resumes. Just enough to blur a timeline. He would have checked the time while running. Mack nodded. Anyone would. He overwound it, Wally said softly. Fear does that. Jam the works. 11:17 was the last moment he felt safe enough to look. The room went quiet. Mack cleared his throat. That tells us when, but not whether. Mick straightened. It was night. Wally looked up. How do you know? Because Keene was seen after dark, because the snow in his coat hadn't crusted, because the bells rang 11:15 while he was still moving, because shops were already closed. Wally nodded once. The city told you the time. Yes, Mick said. The watch only confirmed it. Shay folded his arms. So the man chasing him? Didn't touch him, Mick said. Didn't have to. But he made sure Keene couldn't get warm, Mack added. That he kept moving. That he didn't double back. Wally closed the watch carefully. That's still killing, he said, just slower. Outside, snow began falling harder. The bells started again, not in the hour, not mechanically, but by hand. Mick looked toward the church. Someone didn't want that envelope delivered, he said. And now, Mack replied, they're about to realize they're out of time. Act 4. Midnight. The power went out just before midnight. Not all at once. Toronto was never that obliging, but in uneven pockets, like a city blinking against the snow. Street lights died, storefronts dimmed, clocks behind glass windows froze wherever they happened to be when the current failed. Time for once stopped pretending it was in charge. Mack spotted Hargreave running south, coat flapping, shoes sliding on the snow-polished stone. Oh, no, you don't, Mack said, already moving. Hargreave was not built for flight. Respectability had softened him. Mack, fueled by cold and irritation, gained ground quickly as he cut through the streets lit by candles and windows. The occasional lantern, held by a shopkeeper who had decided Christmas Eve was not the night to panic. Stop, Mack shouted, mostly out of tradition. Hargreave didn't. He turned sharply and ducked into Finch watch repair. Mack followed, skidding to a halt just inside the door. The shop was lit by a single oil lamp. The clocks were awake. Ticking, clicking, arguing. Some ran fast, some slow. One had been stopped deliberately at 11:15, as if refusing to take sides. Shadows stretched and recoiled with every movement second hand. Behind the counter stood Mick. Evening, Mick said calmly. Hargreave stared at him, then at the clocks. Can't prove anything, he said, breathless. Mick gestured gently around the room. I don't need to. You did. That envelope, Hargreave began. Contained names, Mick interrupted. You stole from widows, from children, from a man you erased because it was convenient. I needed time, Hargreave snapped. You stole it, Mick said. You paid for watches that lied. You built alibis minute by minute while people waited years for help that never came. Behind the counter, a familiar voice spoke. That's not how time works. Walter Finch stepped into the lamplight. Mac grinned despite himself. Good to see you, Wally. Still refusing to rush things? Always, Wally replied, especially endings. Wally picked up one of the altar watches and let it tick in his palm. Precision is a responsibility, he said quietly. You treated it like a trick. Hargreaves sagged as the weight of the room closed in. Clocks telling different truths, men who would not be fooled, and time finally catching up. Outside, the bells rang. Not on the hour, not perfectly. They rang because someone pulled the rope. Midnight arrived, whether Hargreave agreed with it or not. Mac produced his cuffs. Christmas Eve, he said. Think people would take the night off. Hargreave didn't answer. Later, much later, the power returned in fits and starts. Official clocks resumed their authority. Paperwork followed its course. Daniel Mercer remained alive, quietly so. The envelope was delivered, equally, quietly. Snow fell softer now as if satisfied. Mick and Mack stepped onto the street. The city felt different, not healed, but honest. Mack checked his watch. According to this, it's 12:05. Mick glanced at Finch's shop window, where Wally was already resetting his clocks. Give or take, Mick said. The bells rang once more, and for the first time that night, everyone agreed on the sound. Act 5, Ghosts of Christmas. St. Michael's Cathedral was fuller than it had been all day. Not with ceremony exactly, no grand crowd, no spectacle, but with people who nowhere else to be on Christmas Eve. Sort of gathering that forms naturally when the weather turns cruel and the calendar insists on hope. Mick and Mack entered through the side door again, stamping snow from their boots. Mack glanced around. This turns out to be a trap. It's the politest one we've walked into. It's not a trap, Mick said. It's a refuge. Seamus O'Rourke stood near the nave, directing traffic with gentle irritation. He handed a hymn sheet to a woman who clearly couldn't read it, then pointed her toward a pew anyway. You're late, Shay said when he spotted them. We took the long way, Mac replied. The city's feeling reflective. Shay snorted. The city's cold. Mick lowered his voice. We need to see him. Shay hesitated, only a moment this time. Then he nodded. Basement, he said. Mind yourselves. He's had enough men deciding his fate. Church basement hummed quietly, voices low, teacups clinking. Soft scrape of chairs on stone. Christmas tree stood in the corner, leaning slightly, decorated with paper stars and a few mismatched ornaments donated over the years. Daniel Mercer sat near the wall, coat folded neatly beside him, hands wrapped around a mug like it might disappear if he let go. He looked up as they approached. So he said calmly, I suppose I'm still dead. Officially, Mac said. Unofficially, you're doing better than most. Mercer smiled faintly. Mick crouched again, the way he had with Keen's tracks. You were a courier, Mick said. Yes. And when something went wrong, they needed a name, Mercer finished. Mine was convenient. Mercer spoke without bitterness. That was the hardest part. Once you're declared dead, he said, you stop being expensive. No pension, no questions, no apologies. Shay stood nearby, arms folded. You don't bury a mistake, he said. You just hide it until it costs someone else. Mac glanced at the tree. Like Keen? Mercer looked down. I never met him, Mercer said, but I know what it's like to be useful until you aren't. Up above them, the choir began again. A carol, not sung loudly, not particularly well, but with determination. Then the lights flickered once, twice, and went out. A murmur rippled through the church, then settled. Candles appeared. Someone laughed softly. Someone else said a prayer that didn't sound rehearsed. Well, Mac said quietly, that's dramatic. Shay looked upward, listening. Storm's taking the power, he said. Bells will have to be rung by hand. Mick checked his watch, which means schedules stop mattering. And choices don't, Mac added. Shay met Mick's eye. You going after him? Yes. Shay nodded. Good. Mercer looked up. I don't want a parade, he said. You won't get one, Mick replied. Just the truth, put back where it belongs. Mercer nodded, eyes wet but steady. As Mick and Mack turned to leave, the bells began to ring. Not perfectly timed, not synchronized, but strong. Human hands pulling rope, announcing a night that refused to be managed by gears or ledgers. Mac paused at the door. Funny thing about Christmas, he said. Everyone thinks it's about miracles. And Mick asked. Mac looked back at the basement, the tree, the mugs, the people no one counted. I think it's about not letting people disappear. Outside, snow fell harder. Somewhere in the city, a man who had built his life on stolen minutes realized he was out of time. Epilogue. Christmas morning came without ceremony. Toronto was closed. Shops were shuttered tight, their windows dark and respectable. Streetcars ran on reduced schedules, gliding through the snow as if reluctant to disturb this day. The city belonged to church bells, bundled families, and the thin blue smoke of breakfast fires curling from chimneys. Mick and Mack walked slowly. There was no reason to hurry now. Whatever business Christmas required of the city had already been done. Outside Finch Watch Repair, the windows were dark. The sign hung still. Inside, the clocks were silent, not broken, just resting. Time, like everything else, had been given the morning off. Mac nodded toward the shop. He'll be along later, he said. Wally never misses a day. He just believes in starting them properly. Mick smiled faintly. That's a philosophy, not a habit. From St. Michael's, a choir's voices drifted faintly through the cold. Carols carried on careful breath, not loud, not showy, just steady. At the church steps, Seamus O'Rourke stood directing foot traffic, with unnecessary authority, handing out cups of tea from a large dented urn. A few men lingered nearby, warming their hands. No questions asked, no names taken. Jay spotted them and lifted a hand. I told him, he said, Christmas is no day for standing alone. Mac tipped his hat. You run a tight operation, Shay. I run a merciful one, Shay replied. The paperwork can wait. Somewhere below official records and polite fiction, Daniel Mercer remained alive. Quietly so. Not celebrated, not corrected. Simply allowed to exist again. He turned the corner. Snow crouched underfoot. The Salvation Army kettle stood unattended, its bell tied neatly to the handle, as if even Charity had paused to breathe. Mac checked his watch. According to this, he said, it's still Christmas. Mick looked down the empty street. closed shops of drifting snow, the people moving carefully from door to door. For once, he said, I think it's right. The bells rang again, measured, human, imperfect, and the city listened. The end. Thank you for listening. This has been Ontario Cold Cases, Canada's True Crime Podcast, and a Mick and Mack mystery.